Okay, Parsha's Bamidbar, here we go. This week's Parsha, the beginning of a new book in the Torah. It's the fourth book of the Torah. And it talks a lot about the journeys of the Jewish people throughout the wilderness. About their 40 years throughout the wilderness, a lot of it is in this book. And you learn a lot of lessons from the Jewish people out throughout the entire book. A lot of their struggles, so to say, and a lot of things that they overcame to be successful. The first thing that the Parsha's Bamidbar talks about is counting the Jewish people. The counting process of the Jewish people, counting each Jew. Now, when we take polls, right, we're going to go to the elections in a half a year or so, and you take elections, so you go, you have different places that are set up, you drop in your ballot, and that's it. There's nobody that really says hello to you more than the fact that you just register to know that you're actually an existing human being with your license or whatever. But there's no, hello, how are you, blessings given, no important or special people there. It's just a very simple, nonetheless, type of, thing you got to do, so you go ahead and you do it. Now, the counting of the Jewish people was not to vote. It was to find out how many Jews there were. Find out exactly how many Jews there were. Determine the total count of the Jewish people. Now, it says the word to count the Jewish people for their names. Now, when you're counting people, right, if I wanted to count how many people there are to take a census wherever it is, I'd go ahead and I'd say, everyone just write your name down, or just don't even write your name, and just take a piece of paper and stuff it in. You count the papers at the end, you know how many people there are. So the idea really is that when the Jews came to be counted, Hashem instructed Moshe and Aaron, the leaders of the generation, to be the ones present during the counting process. So the census was performed in front of the greatest people. When you came to drop off your little coin, the way it was, every person would give a half a shekel, like a half a dollar. You'd come in front of Moses, in front of Aaron, and drop in the coin. Why did it have to be that way? Why did Moshe and Aaron have to be the ones present while you're counting? This would seem to be insignificant. Just go ahead, everyone take a coin or whatever it is, drop it in a bucket, count the coins in the bucket, you'll count the numbers, you'll know. Why did Moses and Aaron have to be there? So this is really an amazing idea about Hashem's love for us. The Ramban writes, this is a great commentary, the Ramban, he writes that every person would come in front of them, he would introduce himself to Moshe and to Aaron, and they would pray favorably for that person to have success. So every person would come with their coin and sort of get blessed from Moses and Aaron. Moses would ask him about his life, his name, his family, what he does. And Moses also would be able to tell him advice based upon the wisdom of God about what he should do with his life. So it's really an amazing, amazing thing that Moses was doing over here. He and Aaron were standing there basically blessing every Jew that came, and it was a very uplifting experience. It wasn't just counting. The expression of the verse is, take a sense of the entire assembly, but the head of the Jewish people, which means to uplift the people through the counting, was supposed to be an inspiration. I've had the opportunity a few times in my life to go visit great men. I remember, Jake, when you had the opportunity to see Rabbi Newman by Brian Paul's house. You felt uplifted, right? You felt like there was somebody who was great, who was like taking interest in your life a little bit. And it's a very, very, very special feeling. And I remember myself a couple times. I'll tell you one story that I remember, which really sticks out in my mind. I was a boy, maybe about 10 or 11 years old. I went to Cleveland for a Shabbos. And Sunday morning, we wanted to see if we could see the great rabbi, Rabbi Gifter, the dean of the yeshiva. And he had a stroke already. He was very, very ill. But he actually came to the morning davening Sunday morning. And we knocked on his door to see if we could go get a blessing from him. And we came in the morning. They told us, come back maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll see if it's relevant. So we weren't sure if you'd wait the whole day sort of to be there or not for the blessing. Do you wait 5-6 hours for a blessing or not? So I told my father, it was just my father, and I said, yeah, let's wait. What do we have to lose? So we waited, and about 3 o'clock we go, and his door to his home was open. He was sitting in the living room, and he could see someone by the entranceway. As soon as he saw us, he pointed to me. I was a young boy. He says, "Come here, young man." And I was like petrified. I didn't know what he wanted from me. And he says that I saw you davening this morning in the yeshiva. And I was very impressed the way you davened, the way you prayed. I want to give you a blessing. You should study as well as you prayed. And I'll never forget that blessing. I'll never forget how uplifted I was by those words. I was a little boy, 10 years old. But he said, I want to give you a blessing. You should have the ability to learn as well as you daven. It changed my whole day. And until today, I remember that. I have a memory of that. I cherish it. It still inspires me. So can you imagine going to Moses and Aaron when you were being counted? Hashem was showing his love to the Jewish people, allowing Moshe and Aaron, the leaders of the generation, to be the ones to count everybody so they could take interest in their lives, direct them, and give them proper blessing. So it's really, really an amazing thing. There's a famous saying that the rabbis say in Sanhedrin, that a person must tell himself, the world was created for me. Every person has unique strengths and abilities, and they would go and get a unique blessing from Moses and Aaron, a unique guidance. And everyone, has that uniqueness, that specialness, that even the greatest people in their generation take interest in their lives. I'll tell you a story I heard today from somebody named Saul, about someone named Saul Teichman. Saul Teichman was a pillar of kindness and generosity in the community in LA, the Jewish community in LA. He's a Holocaust survivor, and he literally built a school called Emek Hebrew Academy, a day school, very established, prestigious day school in LA. And he was the main financial backer of that school for dozens and dozens and dozens of years, as well as many, many other wonderful, amazing institutions that he put his heart and his mind to. Very well-known figure in LA, Saul Teichman. So Saul reached 90 years old. And the school wanted to honor him. But what do you honor a guy who's 90 years old, who has millions of dollars, who has everything he would ever imagine could need? How do you honor the guy? What could you do? So they came with an idea to make a birthday party for him. They made him a 90th birthday party in the school, and they had all the children come and perform or whatever it was, and they had many alumni come, and it was a whole celebration for his 90th birthday. And after the birthday party, they had a small reception. People were eating, and they had some sort of reception. And Saul was sitting down at a table, and there were some other people at the table. And a guy turns to Saul, and he says, Saul, and Mr. Teichman, what is it that gave you the drive to put this entire school upon your shoulders? Like, what is it? How did you have this passion, this energy? You're such a great person, a wonderful person. You give so much into the school. You give so much to everybody in the entire Jewish people, in the entire community of LA. You're so busy doing. What is it? So he said, to tell you the truth, his high school years he was in the Holocaust, and he never had the opportunity to enjoy education. He lost out, 4 or 5 years of his educational years. So it's the greatest reward for him to see Jewish students studying, to see them having a proper education, having a school, a prestigious school, a well-organized, well-run school. That's the greatest honor he can have. So then the fellow turned to him again and said, Saul, it's very nice. That's why you keep the school going. But what about the other dozens and dozens of things that you do? The individuals that you help, the smile you give, the warmth, the love, the dedication to so many other organizations, so many other individuals. You're much greater than just the school. So that's a very nice reason for the school. But what about everything else you do? So this is what Saul said. He said he grew up in a city called Munkach. And in 1943, when the Nazis, may their names be blotted out, came in, they made this long line. Everybody gathered everybody together and made a long line. And there were 3 people at the head of the line, 3 officers. And no one knew exactly what was going to happen when they got there. And they didn't really know what was going on outside Munkach. And he was waiting on the line, and it seemed to take forever. At one point, an adult comes over to him, who he didn't know, and says, "What's your birthday?" Saul said, "September 9th, 1927. The adult says, "No, it's not. Your birthday is September 9th, 1925. And he asked him again, "What's your birthday?" "September 9th, 1927. He says, "No, it's not. It's September 9th, 1925. And he says, "This is your birthday. Don't think otherwise." And he asked
That's my birthday, by the way.
Which one? September 9th, 1925.
The September 9th part.
Wow, that's great. So he tells him September 9th, 1925. And he drills him. He asks him the question 25 times. Says, "Your birthday," and Saul was a polite kid, and he just started responding, "September 9th, 1925. And when he got to the front of the line and they asked him what his birthday was, he said September 9th, 1925, he realized that the reason the guy drilled this into him is that he'd go to the right to the work and not to the left to the gas chambers. And he said this person instilled in him the concept of what you could do to change somebody else's life. What one individual can do has the power and the ability to change that individual's life. And that was his motto. His entire life is, what can I do to make somebody else's life better? And therefore, it might be in the form of an organization helping many lives better. It might be an individual. It doesn't make a difference. What can I do to make somebody else's life better? And that's a tremendous lesson from this week's Parsha. Moses and Aaron were sitting there waiting for every Jew to come, to greet them, to enhance their life, to give them that energy, give them that strength. I always, whenever a person has the opportunity to meet a great person, right? It's a very exciting moment. If you can meet somebody that's great, you get excited by it. You feel good about it. If the person takes interest in you, it's all the more so much better. And that is the first part of this week's Parsha, about the counting of the Jewish people. We have to recognize the value of what Hashem was giving us by counting us. It wasn't just a regular census or just, putting ballots in to have some sort of vote. It was just to show Hashem's love for the Jewish people. He counts us because he loves us. And therefore, it's bishmosam with their names. Every name was valuable. Every Jewish person had a value and was a part of this experience. So that's what Judaism is all about. When we see another human being, it's about how you can make that person have a better day. Like I always say, think about the people you're closest with, because they're the people sometimes it's the hardest to do it with, but the most important and where your responsibility is the most. Another interesting topic about counting. Okay, this is a little bit more interesting. It says the word legulgulosam. Gulgulosam means the gilgul neshamas, the transmigration of souls. In Judaism, we believe that a lot of our souls are being reused. There are other people's souls, and they come back down to this world again. And it says over there that Moshe had the task of counting the Jews, the Gulgulosam. The great rabbi, the Ramah Pano, writes that Moshe didn't just merely count the people, but he actually was able to see in the future how many times that soul would come down to this earth, and descend down her. This is not something normally talked about, right? This is something which is more Kabbalistic type stuff. My seer, my friend, talked about it, so I thought I would share what he said about this concept. And it's a very powerful lesson to us. That's why I'll mention it. I mean, the part of that's Kabbalistic is obviously less understandable and less harder to grasp, but the lesson is very, very powerful. The Kabbalists teach that nowadays almost everybody is reincarnated, is a different soul from somebody else. Almost every single person is here to rectify something. And I can give you some examples of how it would be. Example number one. The Talmud relates in Masechtas Gittin a terrible, tragic story. This is during the time of the destruction of the second temple. And there was a boy and a girl who were a daughter and a son of the great high priest, the great Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Shmuel. And they were each taken into captive by different owners. Okay, the son and daughter of the great high priest, they were beautiful, beautiful children, were taken captive by two different owners. Each owner was so impressed by the beauty of their slave, and they happened to mention it to one another. And they agreed to put the two children in a room together, and they'll share the offspring because there'll be so many beautiful, handsome children. And they'll be able to sell them maybe. That night, the boy went to one corner, the girl went to the other corner, and they cried their heart out the entire night. How could I, the son or daughter of a Kohen Gadol, the high priest, have an improper relationship? So basically, they each cried the entire night. They recognized each other in the morning. They didn't recognize at night, they couldn't see each other. They fell upon each other, and they cried with such intensity, their souls departed, they died. Terrible story. Most horrible fate of a young child, the son and daughter of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Says the Bamidbar that who were those souls? Who were those souls? King David, eldest son, was a fellow named Amnon. And King David had a daughter from a different marriage. Her name was Tamar. And Amnon very badly wanted to live with Tamar, have a relationship with her. And he did it was a whole long story how he did it. But he made believe he wasn't feeling well. He convinced his father that Tamar should bring him food. He sent everybody else out of the room. And when he took her, everyone else left the room, he had a relationship together with his sister Tamar. It was a terrible, terrible thing. Terrible violation of morality. And it was a disgrace. Says the Bamidbar, the son and daughter of Rabbi Shmuel, the high priest, were the souls of Amnon and his sister Tamar. And then not having a relationship, then both being in this, cell and crying their heart out, not having a relationship with each other, was fixing up, was rectifying what Amnon and Tamar needed to do. So having the same scenario repeat itself many years later was a rectification of what happened many years earlier. So when you look at the perspective from Hashem, right, it's an unbelievable opportunity. He was able to come back and fix it up. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal thing. So it's tragic from our point of view, but from heaven's point of view, from Hashem's point of view, it's a rectification of the soul. It's a whole different world. It's unbelievable. I'll give you another example. The Chavetz Chaim brings this as a parable. There was a very, very, very wealthy man. But this wealthy man became very arrogant, like many wealthy men do. And, he didn't live the greatest life. He dies. His soul ascends to the heaven. And now he's in big trouble. He has to come back down to this world to fix up the mistakes he made. So his neshama is pleading to God to make him come back down in this world. His soul is pleading to God to make him come back in this world as a poor man. He shouldn't have the challenges that he had when he was wealthy. That way he won't make those same mistakes. But the judgment, the measure of judgment said, let him come down as a rich man to see if he could really rectify himself. And God in his mercy sent the guy back down as a poor man. Is that kindness of God? It's the greatest kindness of God. To give the guy the ability to rectify the issue in a more conducive setting. The verse says, Mishpatei Hashem, the judgment of Hashem, emes is truthful, tzadku yachdav, together they are just. So what does it mean, true, they are true, together they are just? Together with what? Together with the full picture. When we don't have the full picture, we just see what's going on right over here. But there's a whole different world out there. And that's the world that enables this world to function. So we see now, let's just say, terrible tragedy right now, coronavirus. In many ways, on so many fronts, so many things have gone wrong. And it's terribly tragic, and it is from our standpoint. But we have no idea from Hashem's standpoint, so to say, the benefits that maybe we're getting out of this. So it's a perspective that we have to realize that when not everything goes your way, it doesn't mean that that's the worst thing. It might be the contrary, the best thing, you just can't see it. And that's really a very important lesson. So even though I'm not so into the Kabbalistic parts, I don't, have such a great understanding of that, but it's obviously a big part of the Torah, and here we could tap into it and connect the lesson to ourselves when things don't go our way. You see people that are suffering, you see young people that passed away that are very, very tragic stories. Who knows what the real benefit might have been or might be. Okay, another idea. Another idea. It's also a fascinating story, which I'll tell you. One of the heads of the tribes, his name was Eliasaph ben Du'uel. That was his name, Eliasaph ben Du'uel. He was the head of the tribe of the Gad. His name is mentioned 4 or 5 times. In one time, it changes the name of his father. It says Eliasaph ben Reuel. So why did it change his name? As well, in all the plots and all the portions of all the Jews in Israel, and all the tribes of Israel, all the different sections which each tribe had, Moses was buried in the section of Gad. Why Gad more than everybody else? The Chidah explains that there were 4 heads to each group of 3 tribes. There were 12 tribes, and there were 4 camps, and there was a head of each camp. So it means that there were going to be 4 heads, each camp of three tribes. Gad was supposed to be the head of its tribe because he was the eldest in his family. And instead of him getting it, Judah got one. Judah got, one of the heads of the tribes because he was going to be the king of the Jewish people. Even though he wasn't the oldest, he was the king of Klal Yisrael. So Gad was the one that took that loss, so to say, and was not the head of the tribe. So giving that up is why he got the name Reuel. Reuel means friend of God. When you give up for somebody else, then you're a friend of God. So I'll tell you an absolutely wild story. Again, it's hard for us to exactly do this, and I'm not sure when this is all relevant exactly in this level that's extreme, but you can still learn from the story nonetheless. There was a great rabbi whose name is the Stei Chemed. It's a famous story. He had wrote a magnificent encyclopedia, so to say, on many areas of the Torah. Almost every area of the Torah he wrote on. An extensive work. Something you would think that would take a whole team to write, not one individual. And it would seem from his work that he must have been he must have been a brilliant fellow. He writes, though, that he was actually a regular human being with a lot of diligence. And he writes a story of when he got that great ability to understand Torah so great and be able to write all this amazing work. He was studying in a kollel. He was studying in a group of guys. They were being supported by a wealthy man. A number of guys were being supported by a wealthy man just to study Torah. And they lived in the synagogue was in the basement. And he was very, very, very diligent. And people were jealous of him, of his diligency. And the respect people gave him for it. So there was one guy who envied him a lot. And this guy paid a lot of money to the maid who would clean the synagogue where they would all study to fabricate a story that this great rabbi, this Nechamed, did an inappropriate act with her. And she went ahead and she publicized the story. She came out screaming from the shul, the rabbi did this to me. And she went to this and that. And before you know it, everybody heard the entire, thing. And they decided, it looked terrible on this rabbi. So even though the one supporting the whole thing, he didn't believe it. But he had no choice. People were forcing him to get rid of this rabbi, this Nechamed. Now, what happened was, since the owner of the kollel, he didn't believe the story, he fired the maid because he felt the maid was probably lying as well. He didn't want her as a maid anymore. So the maid came one night to the rabbi and said, Rabbi, now that I lost my job, all the money I got from the other guy is gone. I'm out of job. I have no food. Get me my job back, and I'll tell everybody it's not true. I'll admit that I framed you in order to get my job back. So the rabbi felt if he does that, it will be a terrible disgrace on the other rabbi. It'll be a terrible disgrace that rabbi paid money. It would come out a terrible, terrible thing. Here, this is already done. So he went back to the owner of the whole entire operation there and got her rehired. But he didn't tell the guy and told the woman not to say anything, that the whole thing was a lie. And said this to from that point on in his life, he opened up an entire new area of Torah, understanding of Torah to him, which gave him the ability to write his extensive work. So you really see from here that the gift of Torah is directly from Hashem. The more a person wants it, the more a person is a friend of Hashem, they follow Hashem's ways, the more they can actually attain the Torah, the more God will allow them to understand His great wisdom. That's so powerful for us. It's so important to realize that the bigger mensch you are, the more you're willing to give in, the greater Torah scholar you can become, the greater knowledge you can have. So I hope you enjoyed these great lessons. And we shall have a wonderful Shabbos. We'll be in touch.